Lil must have did this beat.
Thank you guys for joining another episode of the Key Chat podcast. And I have a special guest for people that's familiar with the show. This is one of my former guests, actually one of my highest listened to episodes. And this is with Miss Teriece Cherell, the author of Live, Learn, and Love. And we had an amazing conversation when we linked up a few months ago. So since I am going to be wrapping up 2020, I definitely wanted to bring her back. And we're going to have this another transparent conversation about live, learn, and love. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, and I'm happy that we were able to round out the year with yet another episode. Like I said, the next few episodes for the end of 2020 are going to be really special. So, I had to have you, to round it out. So, like I was telling you,
Oh,
I
thank
kind of
you.
just want to do like a continuation of our previous episode because, like I said, after all the episodes I published, yours still ranks pretty high. And we got a lot of feedback, especially when we talked about, analogies of time and everything. So I just wanted to chat it up again with you. I mean, obviously, this year has been a very unique one. So I think the whole conversation about living, learning, and loving will never get old.
Yes, yes, that is so important. And just being reflective of this year, it all boils down to, pretty much those three things. When we
Mhm.
first chatted, I think for me, if you can live, learn, and love, you pretty much figure life out.
Yes.
That's what it all boils down to for me.
Right, right. What do you think this, as far as this year has been? And I know you wrote the book prior to the pandemic. Do you feel like with everything that's taken place this year, is there some things that obviously may have changed your perspective on certain things? Or has it just basically reiterated everything that you've said?
I would say definitely reiterate it because if you look at the chapters on, well, the book is about relationships, all types. So just thinking about everything that's going on in light of COVID, then the
Mm-hmm.
chapter on time is very
Mm-hmm.
relevant because, we don't know how much time we have. And with things happening so quickly, it's very important to make sure that we nurture those relationships, that we let our family members and friends know, that we love them, that we call, that we text. Even if we can't, physically see them, we can Zoom, we can FaceTime. So it really makes everything come more into perspective. Like giving that time is very important, making sure that you manage your time effectively and you're productive with your time. And really, making sure that the people you care about know it. They
Mm-hmm.
should know it, during any time, but especially you don't want to miss that opportunity of telling your family member, that you love them, that you miss them. You don't want to miss that opportunity of trying to mend that broken relationship. See a family
Mm-hmm.
member you haven't spoken to in a while, you had a disagreement and y'all not talking, and then COVID happens, and with
Mm-hmm.
everything happening so fast, you don't want to miss that opportunity. I think about the last time, y'all had a disagreement. Now they're no longer here. And then you
Mm-hmm.
replaying that situation in your mind, like, oh man, I wish I would have called or texted. So it puts everything into perspective. And to me, it's just like, oh my God, it just kind of came full force, like everything just started coming together with making sure that those relationships are healthy, that they're
Right.
mutually beneficial, that you're
Mm-hmm.
nurturing them, just that you're living, learning, and loving. And, we're going to say that a lot because you're going to learn about others. You're going to learn about yourself. Life is about living. You're not
Mm-hmm.
always going to get it. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to fall. You're going to fail sometimes. But it's
Right.
about the lessons that you learn through that, through those experiences. It's about the lessons that you learn through the relationships, the good and the not so good.
Mm-hmm. Something that you said that I really like is when you mentioned about relationships being beneficial. Now, I think with COVID, obviously, I feel like everyone has probably, rethought certain relationships, like you said, which ones are truly valuable that really needs to, be worked on because it's important. I think also on the flip side, a lot of people probably have looked at certain situations and realized, hey, this isn't beneficial. And, we touched on time with the previous episode and how, because time is more fragile than ever, how maybe certain things aren't beneficial. What's your thoughts on that? Because I think sometimes things can kind of cloudy people's judgment. And right now, because people are leaving so much, I think, and even prior to COVID, I think sometimes it's hard for people to kind of weigh, okay, is this one worth it? Is this one not? So what's your thoughts on that? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that, whether they want to admit it or not. They struggle with, and I mentioned this actually in a video I just did recently about certain things having an expiration date. So I think sometimes we do struggle with, is this something that I need to, this relationship, this friendship, or even, a lot of us have dysfunction in our families. Sometimes it's kind of hard for us to really decide which one is the healthy one or which one is the one that may not necessarily be healthy, but there is room for growth, and which one is just absolutely not good for me. And I feel like, probably with COVID, especially some people's judgments are a little cloudy. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I know it's probably hard right now. And that's something I've dealt with personally and struggled with, just dealing with situations or people who, even in spite of the fragility of what's taking place now, it's really not healthy.
I think you have
What's
to
your
look
thoughts
at
on
it
that?
individually. I think you
Mm-hmm.
have to look at it individually because everyone is different and it's pretty much a case by case value. You need to, evaluate and reevaluate each relationship. And based on the dynamics of the relationship, there are going to be some criteria that you may look at differently. So, for example, a parent child relationship may be different from a sibling relationship, the relationship that you have with your sibling, the relationship that you
Mm-hmm.
have with a friend. So, looking at the dynamic of the relationship and the history, of the relationship, you can kind of not make a quick decision. But like you said, not to cloud your judgment, but I think there will be some relationships that just stick out like, okay, there's room for growth. It's healthy overall. Of course, well, there's always room for growth. We always should seek to do and be better. But there are going to be some relationships that you're like, I don't know about this one. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
a 50-50, 60-40. Is it something that you want to put your time into, your effort into? Is it something that's going to drain you? Is it
Yeah.
something that's going to, take you out of your element and put you in a negative headspace when you think about it? Is it,
Yeah.
that particular person like, oh my God, and then, you just get depressed. You just, have this heavy spirit that comes down on you. Or is it someone that you
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? They bring a smile to your face. Yes, you may have had some disagreements. Yes, there may have been moments when you said or did something, or vice versa. But generally, overall, when you think of that person or that relationship, you get a happy feeling. You get a good vibe about it. So it's going to be something that you would have to do case by case, person by person. You can't just,
Mm-hmm.
make that decision for everybody. But
Right.
it is something that I would say you're going to have to pray about. You're going to have to decide if it's worth you, is it a conversation that you need to have with that person? Are you just going to pray about it and, leave it to God, let him reveal that to you? Because he
Mm-hmm.
will in time, of course. It's not going to be, or it may not be overnight. You prayed and the next day, oh, I know what to do. There may be some time, but remember, relationships should be healthy and mutually beneficial. If it's
Mm-hmm.
a one-sided, you giving, 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 and they're taking, 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 that's not healthy for you.
Right.
And on the flip side of that, you want to look for those toxic traits and behaviors that they may exhibit. But remember, we all have them.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, it's on an individual case by case thing, because I did a podcast about 2, 3 weeks ago, and it was about toxic behaviors. And I shared that we all have them.
Oh yeah.
We don't like to look in the mirror and look at ourselves. We're so easy to see the speck in our friend's eye or our neighbor's
Right.
eye. And we don't like to have to, look in the mirror and face the reality of what we see, of what we
Right.
did or did not do. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think that's a part of the whole self-reflection. While you're doing a self-reflection and self-evaluation, and you're thinking about the relationships with others, you need to think about the relationship you have with yourself. How is that relationship? How is the relationship that you have with God? And then you can measure, or kind of have a standard on how you want to model your other relationships. So it doesn't mean if they don't exhibit those qualities or characteristics that you just toss them to the side altogether. There may
Mm-hmm.
be something, there. But like I said, if it's one that's draining you, you getting depressed, it's taking you out of your element, you don't even want to think about it, then that may be one of those let go and let God situations.
Mm. I'm happy you touched on that because I've said that a lot too. Sometimes we also don't want to admit that we all, like you said, everyone has some toxic traits, whether people want to believe that or not. And I think that's the problem sometimes when we come across, hypocrites, because it's like, wow, like you're doing a lot of judging to certain situations and not reflecting on your own behaviors too. On the flip side, I do like how you mentioned just on what's healthy, and I think that's something that people sometimes they can avoid certain things in a sense if, like you mentioned, they're more mindful of certain red flags. And it goes back to what I mentioned the other day about expiration dates that I posted on my IG, with some relationships or things like that. I feel like a lot of times when there are situations that we realize truly wasn't healthy for us, we may have handled it in different ways. Some of us may get upset or even go in depression, like, oh, well, why didn't that work? But you knew it was time to go. And sometimes we linger on to certain things longer than we should have before we let it go. But a lot of times I feel like when you start thinking it back to the beginning of those situations, and sometimes it's like, oh man, that red flag was right there on date number one, or argument number two. Like I knew right there, but
Right.
and I think as human beings with hearts, it's that's the balance that we kind of struggle with, because on the flip side, you don't want to like, oh well, I don't want to just cut so and so off because of this. It brings you through the emotions sometimes. And I think that goes to the learning part, a live, learn, love.
Yes,
Because also learning about ourselves gives us that stronger discernment, but if we don't really learn ourselves first, I just feel like it just kind of opens the door, for a lot.
it does. And even learning yourself takes time.
Oh
And
yeah.
if you ask, like if I ask you, do you know yourself? It's funny because people gonna say yes, but and I'm not, discounting that no one knows themselves, but when you really think about it, everyone doesn't know themselves like they should. Do you
Hmm.
take time for yourself? Do you spend time with yourself? I'm not saying you at home alone. I'm saying, do you really spend time knowing what motivates you, Rhonda, knowing what makes you laugh, what makes you cry, what makes you feel energized, which drains your energy. These are things that we must know about ourselves, because when
Hmm.
we're in relationships, how can you know those things about your partner and you don't know those things about yourself? You have nothing to, compare it to. So that's what I mean when I say get to know yourself, spend time with yourself, date yourself, like they would say,
Yeah.
but really do things, find out about who you are, your spirit, your mental, your emotional, your relational, your financial. Know everything there is to know about you. So when you get in a relationship, I know me. So now you're trying to know and learn the other person, because
Mm.
you're bringing something to the table. So when you think about the time that relationships take, it takes time. People can be in relationships for 10, 15, 20, 30 years and never fully 100% know each other. So when you think about time, it's something that we all should do. And it's years and years and years of constantly living, learning, and loving and growing and making mistakes and reinventing yourself and evolving and becoming. It's a process, it's a lifelong process, and it's a journey. So like we spoke the other night, is for us, is you don't just arrive there. You never arrive there, because as long as you're living, you're learning, you're loving, you're growing, so it's a constant state of, of that particular thing. So as long as you're doing it, there's always going to be something new you're going to discover about yourself. You're going to, discover about someone else. And I think that's the beauty of it. But
Mm-hmm.
it definitely requires that you take that time to know yourself, that you take that time to pay attention, to your wants, to your needs, to your body, to your spirit. And it's a process. It's a daily work in process.
Oh, yeah.
Progress. I'm sorry. It's a process,
But
but
yeah,
it's a daily
process,
work
right?
in progress. You want to progress with it, but it is a process that everyone should do. We're not saying everyone does, but it is something that we should do daily.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And you're so many points correct. And I think that's one thing that people need to learn too, as far as, and it's learn as far as just how we are in relationships. And I think we all know people who kind of hop from relationship to relationship. And that's a dangerous thing too, because we all are human beings. We're creatures of, of just the natural elements of living. We all make mistakes. And like you said, the average person is always ing. We're always living, learning, becoming, loving. So I just feel like sometimes when you don't give yourself that break to just take some reflection on, okay, what could I have also done differently in this situation? Or even if there's nothing that you could have done differently, just what have I learned from this that I want to bring into the next situation or that I do not want to bring, or a combination of both. So when we don't learn ourselves, it is impossible to love someone else. And then on, just to flip the narrative, how can someone love a person that you don't know? How can you love me? How do I know I'm receiving the correct love when I haven't taken the time to learn my love language? Even I haven't taken the time
Right.
to learn what truly sings to me, what reaches my heart, so like you said, there's always room to learn yourself, and I'm always big on go love yourself, obviously, but you got to learn yourself and you do need to live with yourself too in
Well,
order to
look, that
just,
might be another shirt. I'm gonna let you borrow that. We might have to do go learn yourself.
yeah, like I think I'm gonna have to take some points, like, some other things to put on that next shirt, like, because in addition to loving yourself, you definitely have to learn
That's
yourself, and
true.
you also have to be in the right spiritual state, the healthy state to live with yourself and for others to
Hmm.
live with you. And when I mean live with you, I don't necessarily mean in the literal sense, but as far as live with you, meaning just who we come and who we interact with. Can they live
Hmm.
with us? You know what I'm saying? Can they live with our energy? Can they absorb our energy? Can they take it in? So there's always room for that, because just as you mentioned, toxic relationships, toxicity is something that it doesn't just take place in other people. There's toxic things that everyone can work on. I'm not saying everyone that walks around is toxic, but when you're learning and
Right.
becoming, obviously there's things I've done 10, 20 years ago that I definitely wouldn't do now. There's ways that
Right.
I handle things 10, 20 years ago that I wouldn't handle that same way now. And also now there's ways that I handle things that I, wouldn't do younger, because it's a learning
Right.
process. So we
It
should
is.
definitely never, diminish the importance of learning ourselves and learning others around us too.
That's so true. And while we were talking, I just came to an excerpt. I just wanted to share on that chapter 7, time is of the essence. In my
Mm-hmm.
book, Live, Learn, Love with an Open Heart. We need to experience life, love, and learn what we truly want and need from a relationship. Take as much time as needed in order to do what is best for us. Time is necessary in the foundation of building strong relationships. And that pretty much just speaks to what we just said. Time is important in every area of life. When you think about women being pregnant, okay, there's a period of time. You don't just get pregnant and have the baby. You have to, undergo those 9 months of the baby, of you being prepared. But of this process, there's something going on, taking place during that time. So when your 9 months are over, if you carry it to term, then the baby is ready, ready to come into the world, prayerfully healthy, and kicking and crying and everything. So time, no matter what area or stage of life you deal with, time is a factor. And time is something that's always fascinated me. It's like, where does it come from? Where does it go? Because it's always going. It's whether we're in the moment or not in the moment. Time is going to pass us by. So while you stuck over here trying to figure it out, baby, the next minute then pass. The next hour then pass, and you still stuck in the past. So it's very important. I say, roll with it or get ran over by. So time is going to keep going whether you're going with it or not. So that's just
Right.
important. That's a different understanding, a different concept of it. But we hear all these things about time. And like I said, especially today, when you think about so many people dying, relatives, friends, just people don't know, and you're like, wow, and they're remembering, the last time they spent with their family member. We're in holiday season, and this is definitely a hard time for people, who have lost loved ones during this season. Any time is a hard time, but it's just
Yeah.
something about those holidays that really make it, more unbearable. I lost
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother 2 days before Christmas. So, Christmas Day, but 2 days before. So, it's just certain times when you're like, okay, holidays, because you're remembering those times in the past, those memories,
Yeah.
all those good things, but there's still gonna be a sadness as that time comes, and that was years ago, but that speaks to the you never get over it. There's no period of time, to grieve. Okay,
Yeah.
she's been gone for a few years. Okay, you're over it. You never
Yeah.
really over it, depending on how their relationship was, because we were very close, because I was there till she took the last breath.
Mm-hmm.
So, things like that in light of, holiday, like, oh my, but I think of all the lessons that she taught me. I think of all the blessings. I think of all, the good times that we shared and everything that she taught me over the years. And that's when you smile and you cry at the same time, because
Oh
those
yeah.
are the relationships that you want to remember. Those are the relationships, that were healthy, that were meaningful, that were mutually beneficial, the lessons that I can pass on to my daughter, the
Mm-hmm.
lessons that I was taught. So, that's kind of off topic a little bit, but it's all relative to time.
Oh yeah. Oh, I definitely don't feel it's off topic because even now, especially with the pandemic, and I know this year personally was really rough because it was unique for me because I didn't lose someone, but I literally almost lost them. And
Okay.
it was pretty weird actually because I think in normal situations when you like face with someone almost passing away, but then they make it still like traumatized me, in the weirdest way. Like, I think the average person would be like, oh, well, they still made it, but it still was like, okay, now I hit some reality on what could happen and losing someone close like that. It was just very strange. And
Mhm.
just seeing like the differences in the person afterwards, it just still, I felt like I was still mourning the past. So, a time like now, like I said, I think the main thing, if I would take one part of our previous conversation, would be what we said about time. So obviously this year to me alone is the year I feel where a lot of people definitely have reflected, are still reflecting on time. And I know just as a mother, like I just every day I think about the future for my kids and what I can leave for them because like tomorrow's literally not promised. Like, and we say it a lot, oh, tomorrow's not promised, but this year was like a put up or shut up year. It was just like, okay, like we saw it that it really, it was just different on so many levels. So I just think every person definitely reflects on, the past, people that are no longer with us, how we can make things differently with, especially as mothers, our children. If we have broken relationships with people, I've definitely reflected on things like that because I definitely have broken relationships with people who some of them I think it's best that I have that space away from them. But of course, there's some where it's like, okay, this could be done differently. I mean, that's natural. People don't say
Right,
that they're being dishonest. There's always certain,
right,
when it's a normal situation where there's some things that could be worked on, anyone can reflect and be like, okay, I can see where I could have did this differently, stuff like that. So with live, learn, and love, like I said, I could take this whole segment with us just talking about learning alone, because this year also I feel is a year that people learned a lot about themselves. A lot of us, when all this stuff happened, I hate to even give the Rona a name in this conversation, but when all that first started happening, I think a lot of us was wondering like, okay, how is this year gonna be? Will we make it? And then look at us. It's already December. Like 2020 is really about to go. The year that everyone thought was just the worst, but I like to look at the positive link of
yes,
things. And would I say this was the worst year? I probably still wouldn't give it that label. I'll be honest. This was definitely a tough year, an uncertain year, but I don't even think I'll give it the pleasure of saying it was the worst year. Like I can't give it that because I'm still here. You're still here. We're still
well,
talking,
yes,
and our children are still
right, for
here.
us, right, for us, I think we probably wouldn't say that, but you have, if we're going to be sympathetic for people
Oh
who
yeah.
have
Oh
lost,
yeah, that lost people. Oh yeah.
right, that lost people. I mean, I know some people lost both of their parents, the mom
Yeah.
and the dad,
But
within
the
days.
thing
I was just
about it though,
reading.
the thing though, and not to cut you off, that I still feel like even with all the loss and the grief, I feel like a lot of us didn't think we would make it. You know what I'm saying? And we a lot of us probably thought we'd be in a straitjacket right now. And that's the joy
That's
that I
true
still
too.
find, even for the people that, because I know I have several friends that lost parents and everything, and same thing, lost both parents. But like, I just look at it like, we're still here. Like we still got over some of the most things that we never could have even imagined. Like we still have a
Right.
sane mind. And that's just, that alone shows, I think a lot of us learn strength that we just never thought existed,
We
you
have,
know,
yeah,
and even in the midst of the
I
worst
agree.
things ever.
And this was a very, we're in New Orleans. Well, I know you're outside, but this was a very active hurricane season. Look how many, I
Mm-hmm.
think the news said we had 30 named storms. So
Yes.
look at outside of COVID, everything else that was going on in the world. We still had
Right.
hurricanes, life didn't stop because we were dealing with one thing. Life is still going to keep coming. So that's the part. We're still living. COVID is here, but we're still living. We're learning and we're still
Mm-hmm.
living, and we're taking the lessons, and we're still loving our loved ones and our family members and our friends. And like you said, when it first started, in March, I mean, I've been working from home since then. Okay, we didn't really know what to expect. We're like, okay, a few months, do the whatever it was, what the shutdown, okay, the world opened back up. So I've worked home from March since March. So just looking at it, like you said, you found out a lot of things about yourself and about what you could do. You wouldn't think, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I can work from home for half a year, because you couldn't really fathom how it was going to work out. And yet, thank God I'm blessed to still be working, and from home. Like you said, we're here
Mm-hmm.
having this conversation. And even in the midst of it, God is still good. God is still
Mm-hmm.
present. And think about, I started my business this year. I'm working
Mm-hmm.
on my devotional journal. So even in the midst of that, people are still getting married. People are still having babies.
Yeah.
People are still buying houses. So even in the midst of the pandemic and the chaos, good things are still happening.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is not all bad. So that's why I agree with you in a sense that, we have lost, a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
even, and a lot of things may not have gone right. But when
Oh
you look
yeah.
at it, there is still always something to be grateful for, always something. I have friends who didn't make it, and as we
Mhm.
shared previously, when you look, you can't really look back at it, but you can't see that far. So, going back to March, now we can look back, but in March, we couldn't see to December. I
Right.
couldn't see this far. So,
Mhm.
even though things were going on, that's just life. And in a sense, it's the beauty of it is like a good and bad. But now, just looking back, you're grateful and you're thankful, and you know that because you have a faith in God, because you've been not exactly here before, but in a similar place, but because he's done it, then he could do it again because he did it
Mhm.
before. So if we
Right.
ever come across any other pandemic or anything, we've been there before. Excuse me, we know how to deal with it. We're better
Right.
equipped and better prepared because it's something that we've lived through. We're survivors, that. That's why they call
Yeah.
us survivors. So because
Mhm.
we've survived it, and it doesn't always have to be the same thing, but
Mhm.
it may be something different. But because you've gone through that tragedy, that pandemic, you're like, okay, I can deal with this. Small thing to a giant because
Yeah.
you're rooted in the word, because you're rooted in this spirit, because you have that foundation. Now, for people who have no faith, maybe or have no hope, they may really feel that they're lost and don't know what to do because they don't have that what I want to say, that covering, because
Yeah.
they don't really have that foundation. So they,
Mhm.
they aren't like us in the sense that they can pray that they can do that because they're not there yet. Doesn't mean they
Right.
won't be there. They may not just be there at that time. And you definitely need faith.
Mhm.
We didn't get into that, but that's something that you need. If you're going to be dealing with something like this or anything, you're going to need to make sure that you have that faith, something that's bigger than yourself, that's outside of yourself, something that you're going to have to look at and go through when you have those late nights, those early mornings, when you feel like you're losing your mind, when you don't know what to do with the kids, when your family tripping. You're going to need to have something that's going to keep you sane and grounded. And for me,
Mhm.
it's the faith.
Right. You definitely have to have something to believe in. You know, we actually discussed it with me and our new son, who was a guest last week. You know, she was just talking about some of her struggles and everything. And we touched on that. Like, you have to believe in something that's bigger than you. Because if not,
Right.
who do you need? You know, if you start thinking that you're the biggest thing walking, like, you have to have something bigger than you to believe in, especially now, you know, and definitely I'm amazed, honestly, that it's December. That the fact that this year is practically over, it really does seem like it was just yesterday. And in March, I don't think any of us could think that far ahead to December. Like, you know, and especially like you said, with the hurricanes on top of that, like that was some heavy stuff. Dealing with that like
Right.
practically every other week, you know.
And then they had
And
and not just us here. I'm sorry, in
mhm,
California, they had the fires and they still have the
yeah,
fires.
right.
So it's not okay, pandemic, nothing else. They're dealing with fires, some dealing
Yeah.
with earthquakes. We're dealing with the
Mhm,
hurricanes, some dealing with floods, so is everything going on. It's not going to just be okay, one thing we're going to stop. Everything is going to come at the same time, but it's how you handle it. It's
right.
how how you look at it. I mean, people handle things differently, of course, but that also speaks to you having a belief in something bigger than yourself as well, because
Right.
life is not going to stop because you're dealing with one thing.
Mhm. I mean, trust me, the world's still going to keep going, and it's up to us whether how we're gonna go along with it. You know, whether we'll
Right.
go along with it with a positive mindset, or like I say all the time, or we're in a state of doom. You know, and when things are going bad, you can be sure that you're going to make things even worse if you don't have a positive mindset or something to hold on to. If not, like this world really will drown you because like you'll have nothing to hold on to. You won't have a glimmer, and you really will have like a weight on you. And that's no way to live. I mean, there's enough for us to all have on our minds. There's enough for us to worry about, but it's how you handle things too. And that's why, like I said, if anything, if each one of us had any type of label to label ourselves, at the end of this year, would definitely be survivor, because we all made it, in spite of everything. So that's one thing, that we can all be proud of, is the fact that we got past this. A lot of connections I made this year, I actually would not have done it if it wasn't for such a unique situation that was going on. So it's just weird how a lot of us found ourselves, in a sense. A lot of people started businesses because they didn't have another choice. Or some people who have had businesses, like, even our situations, like, I was able to go on different levels because I didn't have another choice. So, I had to pull out the unique hat, and think of how to, make $1 out of 15 cents type of situation. So, the fact that we made it in that sense is a good thing. So, with live, learn, love, and of course, obviously I'm big on go love yourself. So we already talked about, just the learning portion, which I feel a lot of people, don't look at. But, definitely, my big platform is loving yourself. And I know we talk about just in general how we all love others, but just kind of like what we touched on earlier, if you don't love yourself, it's impossible to just be present for anything. Like, you have to love yourself. And I feel like some people can take that terminology, you can take it and run with it, really. But in my terms of going and loving yourself, and I've said this in past posts too, it's not about, and also with the interview with Winter Patterson that you and I discussed, it's not a matter of saying on a Tuesday, okay, well, I'm going to love myself. And you're going to wake up by Wednesday and Thursday and everything's all great. That's not how it works. Loving yourself is work. Loving yourself is saying, okay, I love myself to the point that I acknowledge that, hey, I need to work on my communication skills to be happier. Hey, I love myself enough that, you know what? I'm drinking a little too much. I'm seeing how it's affecting my body. Or, hey, I need to love myself to know that I need to work on my anger. So that's another portion I feel of loving ourselves that we don't see, because we kind of think of the literal portion, or we think of, the nurturing of the physical, but it's not about that. It's about the internal. Now, don't get me wrong, the external actually is important, but it's the
Yes, of
internal
course.
part. What's your thoughts on, if you had to break down with live, learn, love, your platform, what's your thoughts on truly loving yourself genuinely?
Well, chapter 8 of my book is Stay True to You, and that's where I'm going to send you. But when I think about when I think about loving yourself, Whitney Houston had a song, The Greatest Love of All.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my kindergarten graduation song, that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line in there, I found the greatest love of all inside of me. The greatest love of all is easy to achieve. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And for me, outside of love of God, of course, self-love, you hear self-love is real love, self-love is the best love. And that's very important. But when I ask myself, what does it mean to love myself?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you ask a person, do they love themselves, they're going to say yes. But as you stated, it's internal. So when you really break it down and get to the nitty gritty, I don't believe that well, I can't speak for others, but there was a time when I didn't love myself as much as I thought I did. I'll say that.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, that's a part of the process, the living, loving, learning process. But when you think about it and I sharing that, what does it really mean to love yourself? And when I think about it, I think about when we began to see ourselves the way that God sees us. No one is perfect. We all have faults, flaws, and failures. But when we really love ourselves, we accept our faults, flaws, and failures. We embrace them. And we see ourselves as God sees us. We're perfect in his sight. So when you begin to see yourself that way, then you can attract that type of love and reflect that type of love. Now, people love you the best way that they know how. You love based on what you experience, as a child growing up. So if I try to love you the way that I experienced as a child, you may or may not accept it based on what you experience.
Mm,
Love can be different for different people. I can love you because this is the way I was loved, or this is
mm-hmm,
how I experienced it, and you may have experienced love, growing up differently. So we need to teach people and show people how we want to be loved. And I
mm,
believe that you have to have an open heart and an open mind to do it, because the person is going to love you the way that they know how. And if they don't, if they aren't loving you in the way that you feel you deserve or desire, teach them, show them,
mm,
um, how to do it. Show them
mm,
what it should be. Show them, how you experience it. And for me, the perfect example of that is love. God
mm,
is love.
mm-hmm,
There is nothing else. He is love. And since we are created in his image and likeness, we are love too. So
mm-hmm,
if you saying go love yourself and I say I am love, then when you say it, it's just a feeling, but you have to be in the right mental space, like you said. You have
right.
to have the right mindset about it. And it's so funny we're talking about this, because this morning, my Bishop Lester Love, does a 10-minute mornings with Bishop every day for 6 a.m. and I tag you in it. And
Mm-hmm,
this morning he was talking about loving ourselves, and he said, okay, he said, look yourself in the mirror. He said, look in the mirror, focus on one eye, smile, and say, I love me 10 times.
mm,
So, you have to, repetition is good and it gets it in your spirit. And there's always going to be something that you may not like about yourself. I don't like my nose too big, my lips too big, but when you really love yourself, you see past that, because as you stated, it's the inside. It comes from within and it manifests itself without. That's why we
mm-hmm,
say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You can look at one person and it can be he can be the most handsome, buff, tough, whatever you like, man. And somebody else will look at him and be like, I don't know what she sees in him. But it's
right.
because you see him for who he is. You see the inside of him.
Mm-hmm,
They see the physical eyesight. They don't see the spiritual insight.
mm-hmm,
I'm gonna say that again. They see
mm-hmm,
the physical eyesight. They don't see the spiritual insight. So you're both looking at the same person, but you're seeing it with two different sets of eyes.
mm,
They're seeing his exterior. You're seeing his interior. And that's
mm-hmm,
very important. And I say that because that's the way we have to see ourselves. So if I didn't see myself that way, I wouldn't be able to see you that way. How can
mm,
I see the interior of you if I don't know the interior of me? So that's why they say the eyes are the gateway to the soul. That's what he was saying. The eyes are the gateway to the soul. So when you really look a person in their eyes, you can see into their soul, depending on, I guess, who they are and how far they let you go. So my
mm,
nickname is Hollywood, right? I love my
mm-hmm,
shades. I wear my shades. Now, it's a part of my personality. It's my style. But at the same time, think about it. I'm covering my eyes. Everybody can't handle it. So although it's a fashion statement, although it's a part of my personality, it's also a covering of the eyes. So if you don't see my eyes, you can't see into my soul, and that's not meant for everybody to see.
mm,
So it just
right.
depends on, who the person is. And I don't want to say giving them a false perception, but everything isn't meant for everyone. So everybody is
Right.
not, entitled to see you that way, to look into your soul.
Yes.
Unless you give them access, of course. But for me, it's like, no, I'll take them off. If I want you to see my eyes, I'll take them off, maybe. If not, no, you're not ready for it. And I'm not ready for you to see it. So, that's just a little segue, but it's very important when you're loving yourself, as we shared earlier. It's a process. And like you said,
Mm-hmm,
it's not just having a spa day, it's not just doing yoga or meditation, it's a daily practice.
right.
Practices. And it's different
Mm-hmm.
for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be my self love. It's the way you practice or the way you manifest yours. So it's going to be
Mm-hmm,
different for everybody, but it is something that's very important, and it's going to cause for some deep self reflection and self evaluation. That's
Right.
when you're going to have to use my AAA method: acknowledge, accept, and adjust. You remember my AAA we spoke about? That's when
Yeah.
you're really going to have to get into that, because, some harsh realities and truths are going to surface. But if you really want to get to the deeper, to the depth of it, and really love yourself, there are going to be some things that you're going to have to face about yourself that may not be so pretty when you look in that mirror. But that's about being true to who God created you to be. That's about taking off those layers. That's about getting deep down into your soul. And that's when you really see even those parts of you that may be ugly, you still love them because they're you. They're
Mm-hmm.
parts of you. So that's when you get to the accepting and embracing your false flaws and failures. But remember, we're created in God's image. So we still love. Even the ugly parts of us are beautiful in his sight. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
kind of love that we need to have for ourselves, because that's the kind of love that God has for us. And when you really get to that place within yourself, then you'll be better able to recognize that in others, to help others see
Right.
that in themselves, because everybody's not on the same level. So when you love
Oh no.
yourself, that's when you be true to yourself. That's when you're
Yeah.
true to who God created you to be. That's when you're like,
Right.
this is who I am, not the me I portray myself, not the me I show people on my Instagram. This is who
Mm-hmm.
Teriece Cherell is. This is who
Right.
Sharonda is. And
Mm-hmm.
because I know myself, I love myself. And you can
Right.
love me too, because they'll see that it's something that's going to attract them. They're going to want some of it because they want to know themselves and love themselves too, but they don't know how. So that's why they have people like me and you, sisters with a platform, sharing to show them how to love themselves, how to
Mm-hmm.
live, how to learn, how to take these lessons, these experiences, these relationships, and get better in all your relationships. Get better in the way you view yourself. Change your mindset. Transform your mind by the way you look at yourself and the way you view your relationships. And
Right.
when you do that, you'll really begin to appreciate them more. You'll really begin to acknowledge them and accept them for what they are. Even the ones that weren't so good, you can see the lesson in it. You can see the
Mm.
blessing in it, because remember, all relationships are lessons and blessings. Even the ones
Yes.
that didn't work out, there was still something that we were meant to get from that relationship, and there was something that we were meant to give to that relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes when it ends, not in the best of ways, we may be bitter or brokenhearted, and we miss that part. You
Right.
can't miss the lesson. You can't miss
And
the
you
blessing.
you hit the point, and that's exactly why sometimes, when people leave our lives and we get hardened because, like you said, we don't reflect on it's a lesson. A lot of people that enter our lives, whether it was a terrible situation, it wasn't by any mistake. I think as human beings, and that goes back to also believing in there is a higher power. Like, we're not as powerful as we think. These people didn't enter our lives because of something special that we did. They entered our lives
Right.
because that higher power wanted them to be in our life, like you said, for that lesson, blessing, whatever you took from it.
Mhm.
We don't have control over that. Now, one thing I wanted to discuss too, and one thing I
Mhm.
want to say too, when you have that self-love, when you really truly start to know yourself, which goes into everything, live, learn, and love. And the reason I keep looking down, I'm staring at your bag. So,
With a bag.
so
I
I
got mine
remember the
right there.
point. Right. So I remember the points, but live, learning, and loving, when you tie it all together, it really is, I would say, the equation for self-love as well. And when you have that true, genuine knowledge of yourself, you've learned yourself, you know what you can live with and what people can live with, you know what you can accept for love. I feel like it also gives you those reflectors so that you just have a better mindset on how to navigate through life. You also know what to receive. I feel like when you have that genuine spirit, the right people gravitate towards you anyway, and I feel like certain situations that aren't meant to be, when you're more grounded into your discernment, they also bounce off too, without you even having to be, you don't have to go that route, you have to be ugly, things of that nature. So even with live, learning, and loving, what do you feel? How do you feel? And I know you talked about in the book too,
Mhm.
boundaries, of course. I think that's one thing when you start to learn yourself and love yourself, you also learn boundaries too. And
Yes, you do.
boundaries is that thing that saves our lives actually. So, and like I said, I think it's a balance because on the flip side, you don't want to have that hardened heart, like you said. You know, people are human, but we also, everyone needs healthy boundaries. What
We
do
do.
you feel is the balance between having an open heart, which is necessary, but also being mindful of healthy boundaries too? Like, what's your take on that?
I agree. I think that's a part of self-love, as you stated, and it's also a part of those healthy, meaningful, mutually beneficial relationships that we want or strive for. And I absolutely agree with setting boundaries for yourself. The big thing that I find we do is we have these boundaries and we don't communicate them to our
Yeah.
partners, or our children, or our friends.
Hmm.
And there's two ideas I have on boundaries. You can sit down. So okay, if you're in a relationship, you can sit down with your partner or spouse and go over it together, come up with some boundaries together. Or if you do it individually, that may work. But when we have these boundaries, it's important that we communicate it to the other party. Because if we don't and they violate the boundary or overstep the boundary, we can't get mad at them because they didn't know that it was a boundary. They didn't know
Hmm.
that it was something that we were going to have an issue with. And I can share from my personal experience. I didn't always communicate my boundaries. I may
Hmm.
have said, I'm like, this is what I'm going, this is, I'm not going to deal with this is acceptable, this is not. But if I didn't expressly communicate, and I mean say it to them, I mean they're not a mind reader. If I know
Hmm.
in my mind, and we never communicated. But let's be clear about this. We say communication is the key, but effective communication is the key. Effective communication. Because just because I'm communicating with you, I'm talking to you, it doesn't mean that you're receiving, what I'm saying in the manner that I mean, you hearing, I'm
Hmm.
saying one thing, but you may be hearing another. That's not effective. Effective
Hmm.
means me and you are communicating, you're understanding me, knowing what I mean. I'm saying what I mean. I mean and what I say, and it's done in a way that you can understand, and we're on the same page. So
Hmm.
that goes with the setting of boundaries, because I can say, look, this is something I'm not, something that's not acceptable. And they may hear me saying it, but they're not really listening. So
Right.
I'm saying one thing and they're hearing something else. So once again, the boundary is violated. And I'm like, hey, I told you this was a boundary. And they're like, no, you didn't tell me that. So that's why when you communicate, you want to make sure that the person, understands, which is why they say, repeat it, So what I'm hearing is, or so what you said is, and then you can correct and clarify. No, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant, and this is
Hmm.
what I said. So
Hmm.
I see you nodding and shaking your
Oh
head
yeah,
because we there. And
yeah.
that's
Because
very
I've been
important
there.
because right. And that's very important. We have to let them know, okay, this is a boundary. And like I said, my boundary and your boundary may be two different boundaries. So that's why I suggested y'all write your boundaries down together. That way, they have some input and you have some input,
Right.
because you don't want it to be okay, well, you want it to be, a boundary, something that's going to be healthy, like I said. That's why I suggest you each do it together. Because then, if not, then it's my list of rules. I'm not going to deal with this, and I'm not going to deal with this, and you're not going to deal with that. And that's not what you want. That's not what you
Right.
want. That's not healthy either. You want to make sure that the boundaries are healthy and that they're mutually beneficial for the relationship. So we're both gaining something from the boundary. Or even if you have, your own set of boundaries, it's still something that needs to be effectively communicated to your children, to your partner, to your spouse, to make sure, hey, this is a boundary. And if you violate it, there is a consequence,
Hmm.
like we have with our children. There is a consequence,
Right.
to not obeying my boundaries, to
Hmm.
overstepping your bounds, to not following the rules. So relationships are the same way, but not in a, authoritative way, or, a scolding parent way to a child, but in a relationship mature adult manner. That's why I say do it together. That's why I say, let's have a conversation. These are some things that, that I think are, good for the relationship, or some things that we can, discuss or address, however you need to do it, but make sure it's a way that it's, inclusive. You're not just setting your rules and guidelines like they don't have any say, because they might have some boundaries of their own.
Right.
So just making sure that's where, the openness comes from. That's where the open mind comes from, because we're in this together and we're trying to do this together. So I hear what you're saying. I agree or disagree in a respectable manner, and how can we move forward? How can we make sure that these boundaries are designed to protect both of us? Because when you think of a boundary, I think of something that's put in place, a mechanism that's put in place for a specific reason, is meant to protect. So I have this boundary because I want to, maybe protect my feelings, because I want to, protect this or protect that. So there's nothing wrong with a boundary. You just want to make sure that it's healthy, and you just want to make sure that you communicate it effectively.
And I'm glad you mentioned communication, because that is definitely a part of living, learning, and loving. And I definitely was not in my head, because I've been in situations in the past where, someone, does something that crosses the boundary,
Mhm.
and then you kind of get resentful towards that person in a relationship. But then on the flip side, it's like you also didn't tell them, you know.
That's
So
true.
like you said, people aren't mind readers, and some things that are just like what we may think is common sense ain't all that common for the next person.
That's
And
true.
yeah, so sometimes we put ourselves in those positions because we tend to give people too much of the benefit of the doubt. So when they don't deliver, we end up getting disappointed. And
True.
I'm not saying we don't have a right to be disappointed in certain situations, but communication can save all of that. Let's put it that way, because maybe this person doesn't understand that boundary once you give it to them. Maybe because of particular upbringings or whatever, they don't understand that particular rule or lifestyle. And that's something that does need to
Hmm.
be discussed, because that's something where you also can make that intelligent decision. Okay, well, is this a relationship that's worth working on, or is this one I need to walk away from?
Hmm.
So, and it saves us time, which is the biggest thing that we always discuss is time. So, just to wrap up this conversation, and this is something new that I've added since our last conversation, where I'm really excited to have you on. So, I have been ending
Thank
all the
you.
episodes. That's something new since you've been on, asking every person that's on the show, how do you define a queen? And because, like I said, you're one of the most special guests since the Q chat really started to pick
Oh,
up. Like I said, your episode is up there in the ranking. So I'm definitely gracious to have you answer this question. So I would like to ask you, how do you define a queen?
wow. I define a queen as a woman who is confident and knows who she is. She is true to herself. She is a woman that has defied the odds and is determined to be the best version of herself. A queen is a lot of things. A queen is someone who does not feel the need to belittle others to make herself look bigger. We're all queens in our own
Mhm.
right. She is willing to empower, inspire, and motivate her fellow queen, her fellow sister, and help elevate her so that she can see the queen in herself. And I would say a queen recognizes another queen.
Mm.
So a queen is a lot. A queen is you. A queen is me. A queen is all the queens you've had on this platform. But it's someone who really knows themselves. They've gone through the process, or they are still in the process of living, learning, and loving. They are going through the stages of self-love. They have acknowledged, they have accepted, and they have adjusted to themselves, because they are queens and they have queendoms, and they are just ready to embrace that, all that it has to offer, and willing to share with others. That's what a queen is to me.
I love that. And like I said, I'm so happy that I was able to get you on again so I can have you for that segment. And I know people throw around the term queen a lot, but for me, it really is something I take to heart because, like, I feel like we are descendants from royalty. So being a queen and a king is something that is our birthright. So that's why it is really important to me. So thank you so much for this conversation. But before we end everything, give everyone a refresher on how they can contact you, where they can purchase this amazing book. Give everyone all your contact information.
Okay, I am on Instagram at I am Teriece Cherell. Facebook, I have two pages, Teriece Cherell, and I also have a page for the book, Live, Learn, Love with an Open Heart. You can also catch me on Twitter as Teriece Cherell. I have a website, www.teriececherell.com, and that is spelled Teriececherell. The book is also on Amazon Kindle and Barnes and Nobles, both the paperback and the ebook. You'll see me in this nice, beautiful red dress, Live, Learn, Love with an Open Heart. Life lessons on cultivating healthy and meaningful relationships. That's where you can find me. Or if you're local to the New Orleans area, you can always catch me in the Inno.
I heard that. Thank you so much. I was so happy that we were able to link up yet again because I definitely wanted to include you as I round out the year. Like I said, for everyone that has been following the Q Chat, the month of December, I have some beautiful things coming up. I actually have one amazing surprise that I'm not going to say. Actually, I'm not good at holding water, but I'm actually going to try and keep this quiet. So for people
Aww.
that really do listen to the show, and I mean the genuine listeners, I definitely need you guys to make sure you tune in every single Tuesday because there's going to be something amazing that's going to take place with the show. And I'm really happy about it. 2021 is going to be awesome. It's going to be a bigger platform for the Queens. But I definitely want people to tune in these last few episodes with December. Like I said, it's going to be really special. This has been definitely a year that I really can't describe. You know, I can't put a label on it. So I definitely want to give something I just want to end this month special for this show, you know, for people that have been riding with the show. It's been people that I didn't even know were listening to the show that have reached out, and it is a blessing. So thank you again. And the last thing I do want to say, just as me and Miss Teriece Cherell had this beautiful conversation, and definitely go listen to our previous conversation. And we talked about living, learning, and loving. We're all in a state of ing, and it's never too late to learn something different, to learn something about yourself, to make a change for the better. It's never too late to learn to love yourself, or to learn to love other people in a better manner, or to learn things about us so that we're more open to love and that we're more open to open our hearts. And of course, right now, as far as living, as far as the ing, not just in a literal sense, but we're present, we're here, we made it. So every single day is another lesson for us to just live in the way that we deserve. We all deserve to live a life of peace. We deserve to live a life of happiness. We deserve to live a life that focuses on our dreams. And that ties into everything I always say about go love yourself. You know, like I said, when I throw it out there, it's not just a saying. I truly, truly, truly believe every person walking around is a unique creature. I always say this: there's no other Teriece, there's no other Sharonda. That's one reason I count everything all joy. So when you embrace that, when you know that there's no one else like you won't accept anything that doesn't honor that. And then on the other side of that, you'll know that you're so unique and you're so special that the whole world needs to know that gift that you have that you're sitting on. That whole world needs to just talk to you. That whole world needs to be a part of what makes you so unique and special. So definitely love yourself. This year has just taught us a lot. So my wish is I just hope and pray that everyone that listens to this message today, that they can take these nuggets, and I pray that I see you guys on the other side in 2021. But just listen to this entire episode with an open heart. Go back and listen to our previous episode that we recorded a few months ago with the open heart. And I guarantee that you'll pick up on something. So thank you guys again for joining the Q Chat. Make sure you go love yourselves. And thank you again, Miss Teriece.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly been a pleasure. You know how our conversations can be But
I
thank you
know.
so much for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate you.